So you were practicing in Houston?
Yeah, I was practicing in Houston, and Hamsley came to Houston over one holiday period. I think it was Christmas, and he met another gay man named Horseman, and they fell in love. And Hamsley kept coming back to Houston to see Horseman, and they ran into a real estate dealer named Danny Drawer. Daniel Z. Drawer was his name. Danny Drawer happened to be the first violinist in the Houston Symphony Orchestra. He was from South America, and he had gone to the Juilliard School of Music, and he was good at playing the violin. And he wound up in Houston because he married Mr. Weingarten's daughter. Mr. Weingarten had Weingarten grocery stores, which were all over Houston, and that basically formed a real estate company because they owned so much real estate. And so Danny married into the family and began to do real estate deals. One of his deals was the Plaza Hotel, which was out by Rice University. You had the Plaza Hotel, and then you had Rice University going farther out Main Street, and the other side of the Rice Hotel was the Shamrock Hotel, which was built in the 1950s by Glenn McCarthy. But the Plaza Hotel was an old hotel, and Danny had an option to buy the Plaza Hotel, and somehow he ran into Hamsley and Horseman, and Hamsley had money because he had built this successful business in St. Louis, if it was St. Louis that he was from. And so they talked about investing in the Plaza Hotel, and Hamsley and Horseman were going to live there. They were going to be the interior decorators, and life was going to be beautiful. Hamsley was going to move to Houston, and they had this swell opportunity to show the world what great decorators they could be by redecorating the Plaza Hotel. So Hamsley gave all of his money to Danny Drawer to swing the deal on the Plaza Hotel. And when Hamsley and Horsley went out to move into the Plaza, the manager just told them there was nothing doing. Danny did not want a gay couple living in the Plaza Hotel, and Danny already had their money and they had nothing, and so their whole world collapsed. They fell out of love. As a matter of fact, by the time of the lawsuit, they weren't even speaking to each other. So Hamsley hired a lawyer named Will Dickey, and Will Dickey was I think he was on the other side of a lawsuit from me at the time, but he and I would see each other almost weekly in this other lawsuit. And just in small talk, he began to tell me about his suit with Hamsley versus Drawer, where he couldn't get Drawer's lawyer to agree to anything. It was a fight every step of the way. So I agreed to help Dickey with the lawsuit, and we went to court on motion day, which I believe was on Fridays, almost every week, because we couldn't get they would produce no records, they wouldn't answer questions in depositions, and it was just really difficult to litigate this case. So finally the judge, who was a unique guy, his name was Red James. He was from the law firm of Hoffhines and James. Mr. Hoffhines was a big man, and during the early 50s and late 40s, he ran Houston. He was mayor of Houston, and Red James was his law firm. Later on, James, who was from Alabama, he was a freckle-faced, red-headed, stocky guy.
What a memory you have.
With a good sense of humor, and very personable guy. Anyway, he became a judge, and that was who Hamsley versus Drewer. He was the judge who had the case, and so he got tired of seeing these lawyers every week, and he got mad and said, "You guys are down here every week. I tell you what I'm going to do. I want you to go as far as you can with your discovery, and I'm going to give you a day on a Saturday a month from now, and you come back and you're going to have the whole day, and we're going to work things out, but I don't want to see you back in this court until then, so go as far as you can with your discovery until then." Well, my mother was dying, and so we took that one last deposition, and I went to El Paso to be with my mother while she was dying. And at that last deposition, I was taking Danny Drewer's deposition, and Danny, he was a good-looking guy, curly hair, big smile, personable, and in breaks, he was just outrageous in some of the stuff he would do. In breaks, he would come over to the court reporter and rub the court reporter's, massage the court reporter's neck and shoulders and say sweet nothings to her. Anything to get an edge. And so, but one of the things he said the last day of the deposition before I went to El Paso, it may have been on the record, but anyway, he basically said, "You fags have no rights." He wasn't going, he was letting them know they were going to have to fight. He was letting the lawyers know they had to fight every step of the way. He knew they were on a contingent fee, and that they weren't, he wasn't going to settle, they weren't going to get any money, and a Houston jury wasn't going to give them a damn thing, and he knew it, and he was confident, and so that message he wanted us to know. So I told Will Dickey, you deal with all of those motions that we have to deal with, and I'll go to El Paso and be with my mother, and I'm going to do something with Danny's statement about these fags have no rights. And so I wrote this poem, and I came back just in time for this hearing on this Saturday morning, and we recited the poem to our clients, who agreed that I could use the poem. And we go in the courtroom, and the judge comes in. It was full of lawyers. And the judge looked at this pile of depositions and papers, and he said, "You mean I got to go through all of that?" And so he started out angrily, which was unlike Judge James. He usually started with a joke. And so I stood up and I said, "Judge, I've written a poem about this case. Would you like to hear it?" And he said, "A what?" And I said, "A poem, Judge. This is an interesting case. I wrote a poem about it. Do you want to hear it?" And he said, "Well, okay." But he had this clerk, She was an older woman, been around for years, and I think her name was Mary. He says, wait a minute. He said, okay. And then I said, there's just one thing, Judge. It has some naughty language in it. Is that going to be okay? And he says, yeah, that's okay. Just make sure Mary can't hear it. Well, Mary's door opened toward the judge, and she had scooted out there on her chair that had rollers on, and she's listening. And so I recite the poem to the judge.
And after all these decades, you still remember that poem?
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought of the poem in decades till the other day, and it came back. So,
let's hear it.
The name of the poem is Who Gives a Hag for the Rights of a Fag? A promoter named Daniel Z. Drawer was looking around for a score when he spotted a fag with some assets to snag, and Dan's hopes began to soar. With the Plaza Hotel as the bait, Dan started to fabricate. Buy a 10% share, become a fag millionaire, invest before it's too late. When time came to harvest the fruit, Dan started a noisy dispute. Who gives a hag for the rights of a fag? Dan asked, as the fags got the boot. They wanted to settle the score, so they hired lawyers Dickey and Moore, who worked out a way to make Danny pay, and that always makes Danny's soar. The lesson we learn from this feud is that sometimes you can be too shrewd, and if without style a fag you beguile, you just might wind up getting screwed. Well, so I finished that poem, and the judge looked up and he said, Mr. Moore, can I have a copy of that? And all the other lawyers, one by one, said, Taylor, I want a copy too. Can I get a copy? And so anyway, everybody in the courtroom got a copy of the poem.
Now it's on film.
So in Houston, the Bar Association had a really fancy setup. They had big offices, a law library, a really nice bar, and a really nice restaurant that many lawyers had lunch up there every day. And the judges would come down from the courthouse, and they would usually sit around two tables sitting together. And about 3 or 4 months after, I have to say that day after the judge got the poem, we went through all of those documents, and he ruled for us on every ruling. We just obliterated Danny, and they settled the lawsuit immediately after that session. They knew they were dead. The judge showed that he gave a hag for the rights of a fag, and so anyway, I went to lunch one day in this really fancy dining room where the Bar Association had their offices, and Judge James spotted me, and he was sitting with a table of judges, and he said, "Hey, Taylor, come over here." And so I went over, and Judge James is telling the other judges about the day that I just made that poem up in his courtroom that day, which tells you how memories go. And then he turned to me and he said, "By the way, Taylor, how are our cocksuckers getting along? So, anyway, that's the poem. That's the story.
Justice for the lads.
Yeah.
Wow, what a memory you have.
Well, when you get old, you can remember things a long time ago. I just can't remember what happened yesterday.
Well, thank you for that story. So was that, sounds like it was one of your memorable cases.
Well, it was a neat lawsuit.